Namaste. I'm Krishna Keshava, and I'm here with Edwiser Lady, and we are filming the first episode of the Garden State of Mind podcast by the Princeton Bhakti Vedanta Institute, located in New Jersey. So the Bhakti Vedanta Institute is a nonprofit educational organization that focuses on how life and consciousness at the intersection of science, philosophy, and religion is thought about, how it's studied within the sciences and within the humanities. We have conferences once a year, books, online publications that look at the nuances of this wide-ranging topic. And this podcast is to help us dive into a more ecological vision of that broader field of study. So we look forward to this first discussion, and very happy to be here with Edwiser Lady.
Thank you so much, Krishna Keshav, and I'm here to start our very first episode of Garden State of Mind. What a beautiful name. And Garden State because it's New Jersey, yes, and we are known as Garden State,
yes,
and the state of mind. Consciousness, right?
Consciousness.
Yes. So as part of first episode, being a professor of environment and sustainability, I want to talk about environmental ethics, which is also a paper that you published about, right?
Yes.
And I read it. It's a beautiful paper.
Thank you.
We are going to put the link in the description. You can watch it or you can read it. What is environmental ethics? Yes. How do you define them? And I mean, as a professor, I know it, but when you talk about mind and consciousness, and especially in the state of ecological consciousness, how do you define environmental ethics?
So ethics means a framework for navigating how we take action, right? If something is correct or incorrect, is an action correct or incorrect, and what standard are we holding that decision to? So ecological ethics or environmental ethics is the standard or the field that discuss standards for proper, correct, or incorrect actions within the environment, between the human population and the environment within which they live and are participant.
So when we talk about Sanatana Dharma, it's full of what ethics are and the righteousness, right? Yes. And when we talk about environmental ethics, and in your paper, you specifically talked a lot about land ethics. How do you relate these two?
Yeah, so within the academic field of environmental ethics, historically different thinkers have given their perspective of what an environmental ethic should entail, how an everyday person who's living in nature, trying to coexist, live their personal life, while also dealing with the natural circumstances around them. Different thinkers have given their perspective on what is the best way to think about the environment and take action within the environment. So Aldo Leopold, who's a well-known figure in the environmental field in general.
I actually read a lot of his works, Leopold, yes.
Like the Sand County Almanac, I think, is his biggest work. And so within that Sand County Almanac, he has a section about the land ethic. He calls it the land ethic. And his whole premise is that the land is not something which is just external to humanity out there waiting for us to use its resources for our benefit, but rather we are an interconnected part of the land. The land is a network of life, and how we can first conceive of that network and our place within it, because in order to act in a certain way, we have to have a mental framework of what we're dealing with. Right? And this is a Western scientist, ecologist saying this, but it's actually very helpful to start having a dialogue with the Eastern Vedanta tradition, because everything is about how consciousness shapes the world. And so I started the paper by contextualizing it within Aldo Leopold's land ethic and trying to build upon that and stay true to his original ideas, rather than some of the more modern interpretations of his work that try to marry it to concepts that are more materialistically inclined, which I found not to be helpful. I found that by trying to go in a more spiritual direction with the land ethic, it stays truer to what he originally said, and we find more applicable ways to utilize it, which end up bringing us to biomimicry, the field of biomimicry, and bring us to the field of ecology and religion, how our religious inspiration can further inspire us to be good stewards of the environment, and vice versa, how already having an ecological conscience, wanting to be a good planet Earth inhabitant, leads us to actually caring about creation in general and seeing things in the context of the divine and inquiring further into what is the divine and our place within it. So that was the underlying motivation for the paper.
You focused your whole paper on two aspects, which are biocentric and biomimetic. So for those who know what biocentric and biomimic are, we know it more in the sustainable and technological concepts, because when we talk about biomimicry, we usually talk about the bullet trains and the wings of an airplane in technological aspects. But after I read the paper, it struck to me that how beautiful it is that we are correlating biomimicking to consciousness. How did you do that? Like, how did you find the relevance?
Yeah, so my attraction to biomimicry came through my guru, who I lived with for 7 years. His name is Dr. Bhakti Vedanta Puri. He's a Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasi who was born here in America and pursued a scientific path, which led him to the question of consciousness, which the scientific scene in America in the early 1970s, late 1960s couldn't answer, which motivated him to go to Bhakti Yoga and to learn about Krishna consciousness. And his whole life's path led to this Princeton Bhakti Vedanta Institute. And I met him back in 2018 and lived with him for 7 years until he passed away this past October 2025. And within the last year of his life, he was talking to me about how biomimicry is a great example of the Vedic aphorism, Atmavan Manyate Jagat. So Atmavan, this is a Sanskrit aphorism. Atmavan means Atma, or the self. Manyate means the mind, and Jagat, the world. So basically it means as your internal world is, so your external world will become. Or how your consciousness is predisposed, that's how your external circumstances will manifest. So that is a huge, deep topic that takes us from nuances of our material life, but also what is beyond this material world at the end of death. So biomimicry for him was a perfect example of this, because it said that you can have a kingfisher bird, and it means so many different things for different people. It's not just a biological organism. For the Dune Sun warriors of Borneo, it's a symbol that evokes fear for some reason. In ancient Greek mythos, it's a symbol of love. And then in contemporary engineering, it's the model for a really fast bullet train.
Bullet train, exactly.
Right?
The beak itself.
The beak itself.
Whole evolution, yes.
I mean, so you can't define a thing as an external object independent of consciousness, which is what science tries to do, right? Its definition is intimately tied to the consciousness of the observer who's trying to define it. And it changes based on the observer's needs for that object. And so that principle is very profound that Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj taught to me, and I'm trying to unpack that. And this paper was one of the first attempts at unpacking that.
When you talk about biocentric, how do you define it?
Biocentric. So bio means life, and centric means a worldview where life is valued as most important. So in environmental ethics, biocentrism, or biocentric individualism as it's more often known, is an approach to ethics where life is seen as having intrinsic value. Not that life is only valuable to the extent that it has a monetary significance for human society. So that's what it's contrasted with, right? There's the economic value of a tree or an animal species based on how human society can exploit it. And that's one way of making ecological decisions. We throw away things that have low economic value, let them go extinct, we don't care, and we preserve things with high economic value. But that throws the whole, because the ecosystem, the global ecosystem and all of its sub-ecosystems is a web, interconnected web. We don't know how much destruction we do by throwing away or letting something become destroyed or extinct that we perceive as having no value because it doesn't make us money or doesn't contribute to the economy. we don't know how that's going to hurt us in the long run and hurt the whole infrastructure of the environment. So biocentric thinking says that every life form has intrinsic value, and we have to act in such a way that respects each individual life form.
When you say each individual life form, you're talking about the humans or the plants or the animals, or in totality?
In totality. But then, so as the paper develops, it touches on each of these important topics but goes beyond them, because there's some issues there. With biocentric thinking, then how can we take one step if it's going to crush an ant? Or how can we take one breath if it's going to kill bacteria in the air? If we take it literally, then we become paralyzed. So the necessity for taking the sentiment of there's intrinsic life everywhere, but yet we must still live even when it hurts other living entities. So how can we find a balance? And there's even actually a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam that the Sanskrit escapes me right now, but it says that in this material world, life only exists by taking other life. You can't escape that dynamic in the material world. I think the verse is something like Jivo Jivasya Jivanam, something like that. And so what to do? One other part of the biocentric individualism was you had to have a certain individual who was trained well enough, or just had an instinct where they could make decisions based on the sentiment of biocentric individualism while taking all other realistic things into account. So then we built off of biocentric individualism to deep ecology, right? Because now we have the need for this individual with biocentric sentiments, and we were looking for a further qualification. What's another qualification this decision maker should have? And deep ecology says that self-realization is necessary. And if you look at deep ecology is a huge subfield in environmental ethics, and I'm forgetting now the name of the individual who inspired it, but his original vision of self-realization for ecological conscience was inspired, he's a Westerner, but it was inspired by a Bhagavad Gita verse. And I told that in the paper. And so basically, we're taking the biocentric, the biocentrism person who has to be able to make decisions, and now we're adding that he must have the qualification of self-realization. And the question you may ask is, what is self-realization?
What is self-realization? Oh my goodness. So we cannot squeeze it into one whole year of podcasts, because the whole Vedanta is developed based on self-realization.
Tato Brahma Jigyasa.
And the Mahavakya Chatushtayam, as we say, the four main sentences like Aham Brahmasmi and all that stuff. Oh my God, self-realization is my favorite topic, and you also touched it in your paper.
Yes.
Talk about it.
So self-realization. The trajectory of the paper was building up this foundation of environmental ethics perspectives to then show the contribution of Vaishnava theology as well. So when we talk about self-realization, it's inspired by the vision of the Vaishnavas that reality is a self-conscious whole. And that their self-conscious means that the totality of reality, there's personhood there. Whether we see it as Lakshmi Narayan, or Sitaram, or Radha Krishna, or the infinite number of names, right? The Brahma Samhita says Ananta Rupam, that there's infinite forms, infinite names of the divine. But it's the personal nature of that divinity, the Bhagavan, right, is so important, because it's the responsibility to cultivating a personal relationship that is what drives both the ecological conscience in the mood of devotional connection, devotional service to that supreme personhood of the whole. So self-realization means seeing oneself naturally in connection with that whole, and taking all day-to-day actions within that context of I am a part of the divine whole. I am constantly in communion with that through body, mind, and words. And so my everyday activity in relation to the environment, the ecological environment, my social environment, everything my emotional environment, my mental environment, my activities, my actions in relationship with each of those environments is for the greater purposes of the whole of which I'm just a part. So self-realization is to have that in mind, to act with that in mind. And of course, the whole development from the ancient Vedas to Vedanta and then to Bhagavat are telling us how we can purify our consciousness to better be in a situation where we can really see that and act from that place, which that would definitely be a whole nother topic. But the general gist is that self-realization is to see oneself as an eternal part of this self-conscious divine whole, and that we are constantly in relation to that, and that affects every nuance of our day-to-day action. And so the paper focuses on the ecological action, but of course it has implication for every action that we take in every sphere of our experience.
What did you derive out of the whole thing?
Yeah, so the paper in general, it was a result of my finishing my undergraduate degree at Stockton University, and it was basically giving a theoretical environmental ethic. So then after I had finished that, I just felt compelled, so what is the practical application of the theoretical thing? So what my heart conclusion was, which is aligned with my guru's teachings, is I wanted to focus on, so there's a part of the paper that we didn't talk about where one of the real practical aspects was how to judge the value of any species, right? Because that's a part of the decision-making process. And most of the time, animals at the top of the food chain were considered very valuable, and you have to protect them. And animals that were lower on the food chain may not be so important. But then I gave the example of bumblebees, because they're a keystone species, and that bumblebees obviously aren't on the top of the food chain. But if bumblebees disappeared and their pollinating capacity stopped, then the entire ecological web would crumble. So clearly we need a standard of value that goes beyond just, is it a primary consumer or not? So I was thinking, what other animal that is overlooked based on the current standard of value is actually much more valuable than it seems with a more spiritual vision? So naturally my mind came to the cow.
Okay.
Right? So the topic of the next paper will be the practical application of this environmental ethic, showing the importance of the cow and how specifically in America, due to the culture of eating so much meat, red meat, steak, of leather industry, all this, over 41% of all land use in the contiguous US, which means 48 states in the mainland, excluding Hawaii and Alaska, 41% of the land in the mainland is all for cattle grazing and growing feed for the cows. So that's a lot of the land, 41% of the total mainland US, that could probably be used for other things, much better uses. So if we can shift our relationship with cows, we can get that land back, right? So how would we begin to shift our relationship with cows in a country that's much influenced by people who just have economic interests in mind when they make big scale decisions? So we have to demonstrate what is the value of a cow, an economic value of the cow outside of the dairy, meat, leather industry. And so the conclusion was that they have a very promising value in the mental health sphere, because they are being used more and more in the animal assisted therapy for social workers and physical therapists, to help people with addiction or disabilities, to overcome their issues. And so the more cows are shown to have that kind of value, the more we can shift this whole land use problem. So that was like for me, that was one of the real practical takeaways of thinking about all that was, okay, this is a problem, a real problem that people can relate to, that we can potentially make a difference in based on this other paper.
Wow, that's a lot to take, right?
Sorry.
No, I mean, I love learning stuff. So at least through these podcasts, I'm learning so much. As a professor, I read so many papers and I've gone through so many journals, and I also teach like 5 subjects a semester. But it's always good to learn from a different vantage point. And podcasts like this and discussions like this put those perspectives out and give the people, as I said, like a different vantage point to look at the things, right? So I know we are running out of time, and I don't want to like extend this further, but in the future, I would like to know more about self-realization and the state of mind, the garden state of mind.
Garden state of mind.
Yes, and we'll have more topics too. And we'll also ask the viewers to actually suggest some topics that they would like to learn about or listen about, so that we can actually bring those here and
Amazing.
talk about them.
Amazing.
And it's always beautiful to correlate Vedanta and the Hindu philosophy, the Sanatana philosophy, and bring environmental and sustainable aspects to the forefront, because they always went hand in hand. And somehow they developed a huge gap between them. But they're always together.
Yes.
You know, it's like hand and glove relationship.
Yes.
But somehow the glove got changed to a different hand. It's misfit. Right? Yeah, we still see the glove, we still see the hand. It's just that they don't fit anymore.
But triangle, it's like
yeah, I know,
it could
right?
be a better fit.
Yeah. So we need to, bring it back. And
Yes.
I'm so glad we could actually talk about it.
Yes, thank you.
And as I said, we are going to put that link of your paper in the
Yeah.
description. And please do subscribe to our podcast, and we are going to bring more and more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you.
Likewise.
Likewise. Thank you.
So here at the Princeton Bhakti Vedanta Institute in New Jersey, this institute was founded actually back in 1976, the original Bhakti Vedanta Institute. Our serving director, who recently passed, Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, he was one of the 5 founding members of the original institute, with the founding director, who was Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, also another PhD scientist, and they were given the direction to show how Vedanta and Bhakti Vedanta can show modern science how life and consciousness are not reducible to matter, and all of the implications that follow from that very basic principle. And we are blessed to have this office in Princeton since 2012. This current location a little sooner. Our previous office was right across the street from Princeton University for 8 years. That's where I first encountered the Institute and Dr. Puri. And we have a lot of programs every year. Since 2013, we've had the Science and Scientists Conference, which has been helping to bring thinkers together from the sciences and humanities to talk about different topics every year. This year, we plan to have the topic as related to this ecology and religion. And we hope to have it in person now. Since 2020, it's been online. When COVID happened, we had to move online. But in 2019, we had it at Rutgers University, and it was always in person previously. So we hope to have it in person this year. And of course, putting together an in-person conference costs money. In addition to our other institute expenses, such as paying the rent in our office and continuing our monthly free vegetarian meal distributions, sanctified vegetarian meal distributions, or prasadam, if you're familiar with the term, prasadam distribution. So we have a lot of great activities going on here in the Mercer County area and the broader New Jersey community. If you're interested in helping our activities, please donate. We'll include the link in the description, but you can also find it by going to our website, www.bviscs.org, and there's a donation tab right there. All donations are tax exempt since we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we look forward to contacting with you in the future.
Namaste.
Namaste.